Donald Trump's joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a couple of bombshells in it. Some bad news, some of what Cenk will inaccurately call good news. And we're going to break down all of that right now. In this first clip, what does Trump think about the settlements being developed right now inside of Israel?
As far as settlements, I'd like to see you hold back on settlements for a little bit. We'll work something out, but I would like to see a deal be made. I think a deal will be made. I know that every president would like to. Most of them have not started till late because they never thought it was possible. And it wasn't possible because they didn't do it. But Bibi and I have known each other a long time, a smart man, great negotiator, and I think we're going to make a deal. It might be a bigger and better deal than people in this room even understand. That's a possibility. So let's see what we do.
Let's try it.
Doesn't sound too optimistic, but that's he's a good negotiator.
Half of that is just gibberish.
No. It's really promising. I'm not kidding. So there's only one thing that Trump does other than grab the spotlights. To be fair, two things. is he likes to make deals. And so I've said from day one, the one upside of the Trump administration could be that he has some chance of making an Israeli-Palestinian peace deal. And first of all, he's now turned around and saying, hey, the settlements are not a good idea. That's good.
I'd like you to, what was the exact word? Hold back for a little bit.
I know, but the reason he's, but if you look more into those details, what he's saying is, let's get a peace deal, and then in your territory, you can build settlements as much as you like. So that's a giant distinction. Now, if you say, hey, wait a minute, Cenk, Obama wanted him to hold back on settlements, everybody does, right? Well, the difference is that Netanyahu is actually a tiny bit scared of Trump. I'm going to keep it real here. With Obama, he was like, whatever, dude. I got your Congress better than you have them, right? I got their back. But Trump has both been supportive of him, so he doesn't want to ruin that. And he knows that if you get on Trump's bad side, the dude's got really thin skin. Next thing you know, he comes at you with a hammer. So Netanyahu is uncharacteristically meekish in front of Trump. But even there, he still couldn't say yes to holding off on the settlements because he wants to build settlements and doesn't want a peace deal.
And they've been building a crap ton of them recently. That's the technical term. That means thousands. And so are we predicting that they're going to reduce those numbers, that they're not going to continue at the furious pace that they've been at the past few months?
In terms of the settlements, that's a great question, John. No, I'm not predicting any specific action, certainly by Netanyahu. I'm just saying that Trump is motivated to make a deal because he likes deals, and he knows that in order to make that deal, you actually have to be tough on Israel. And he talked about that in this case, too. Whereas the other politicians, Republican or Democrat in the country, honestly didn't have the guts to be tough against Israel. Whereas Trump doesn't even know, he's a bull in a china shop. He doesn't even know the consequences, doesn't care about the consequences. He's like, what do you mean? And could he threaten their funding? He's nowhere near that now, okay? But by the way, he said that, oh yeah, I'm going to move the capital to Jerusalem, and he put hard right-wingers as the ambassador to Israel, etc. Now all of a sudden, not going to move it to Jerusalem. Now, all
Did they announce that? I didn't see that.
Yes, that's right. So he's like, hey, he said, I'm reconsidering. We're not doing it yet, okay? And now all of a sudden, hey, we're going to say settle down on the settlements, okay?
Okay.
So I got hope on this. You can call me crazy, but I think there's some chance they're going to pull this off.
Okay, well, that's the first video. Why don't we take a look at the second video? Because you said there he doesn't understand necessarily the consequences. I think he doesn't necessarily understand the proposals that have been basically on the books or on the table for the past few decades. So what about two-state versus a one-state versus an alternative solution?
So I'm looking at two-state and one-state, and I like the one that both parties like. I'm very happy with the one that both parties like. I can live with either one. I thought for a while the two-state looked like it may be the easier of the two. But honestly, if Bibi and if the Palestinians, if Israel and the Palestinians are happy, I'm happy with the one they like the best. As far as the embassy moving to Jerusalem, I'd love to see that happen. We're looking at it very, very strongly. We're looking at it with great care great care, believe me, and we'll see what happens. Okay?
Thank you. I read yesterday that an American official said that if you ask 5 people what 2 states would look like, you'd get 8 different answers. Well, Mr. President, if you asked 5 Israelis, you'd get 12 different answers. But rather than deal with labels, I want to deal with substance. And it's something I've hoped to do for years in a world that's absolutely fixated on labels and not on substance. So here's the substance. There are 2 prerequisites for peace that I laid out several years ago, and they haven't changed. First, the Palestinians must recognize the Jewish state. They have to stop calling for Israel's destruction. They have to stop educating their people for Israel's destruction. Second, in any peace agreement, Israel must retain the overriding security control over the entire area west of the Jordan River.
That could be a problem, theoretically.
Yeah.
But just the fundamental bullshit of saying, I'm interested in substance, not labels. You guys are talking about 1 state versus 2. That's labels. I want substance. That's not labels. They're talking about sovereignty. They're talking about self-governance, being able to control your own destiny, being responsible for your own security. That is not just a label. That was propaganda that he was spouting right there.
Okay, so let's do this one at a time. First of all, when Trump says 2 state, 1 state, I like them both. I like whichever one they like. Netanyahu couldn't help but laugh. What does that mean? So the 1 state solution is permanent occupation of the Palestinians, or the Palestinians outvote the Israelis and there's no more Jewish state.
Which they would never allow. So you're never going to have, like, America with Palestinians and being able to vote the same. They're never going to do that. See, that's just the status quo continuing.
So there's no way that the Israelis and Palestinians agree to a 1 state solution. It is not a thing that is possible, because either the Palestinians outvote the Israelis, which the Israelis would never agree to in a 1 state solution, or the Palestinians are permanently occupied and oppressed for the rest of time, which the Palestinians would never agree to. There is no such thing as a 1 state. I know that people are talking about it now because they're monstrous right-wingers who say, who cares about the Palestinians? Let's occupy them forever, and they just don't have any rights. So what? Right? Including our ambassador to Israel, that is basically his position. But you can't say, well, if the Palestinians like it too.
Yeah.
Palestinians are not going to like that.
Well, so either he knows that and still said it, or more likely, he doesn't know that.
He doesn't know it. That's why Netanyahu laughed.
He also said, we have to have the overriding ability to secure the area west of the Jordan River, which again means 1 state, or at least 1 security state, regardless of whatever else you have.
So that goes to the second substantive point. Netanyahu constantly moves the goalposts because he doesn't want peace. Even in the middle of that press conference when Trump's like, let's do peace, he's like, I don't know. And even Trump said, I guess he doesn't want it, but or you saw for yourself along those lines. Now, so his original statement was, you have to recognize Israel. Now, I think that Palestinian position has been so wrong for so long. Yeah, of course recognize Israel. Whether you recognize them or not, they're real, they exist. And of course you have to do that in order to live together. But so they finally did. They recognized Israel. And then Netanyahu was like, oh, just kidding. I meant recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Now they're like, wait a minute now, if we're 2 different states and you're the Jewish state and I'm whatever I want to be, okay. Now, if you say recognize Israel as a Jewish state and then you go, it's a 1 state solution, haha, you never get any rights.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a stupid juvenile trick, right? So now, but still, if I'm the Palestinians, I go, yes, 2 state solution and Israel's the Jewish state. I recognize it. No, I would do that in a second. Who cares? That's the reality anyway. And you're not gaining anything by holding back on that.
No,
and
you're
it's the
looking
wrong thing to do. Yeah. So, and then the other goalpost is, oh, no, you get your own state, but my military rules it. Well, then you don't have your own state. And even if they agreed to both of those, Netanyahu would move the goalposts again.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want a peace deal. He wants to take more and more land in the West Bank, and he's been doing that throughout his entire reign. That's why you're getting all those new settlements.
Well, yeah, and that's why whenever you see discussions in the Western press about violence there, the reporters, will do mental backflips to try to fool you into thinking that there is some level of parity on both sides. That's why whenever they talk about attacks going into Israel, they never say this is how many people were killed or injured. They always say this is how many rockets were fired. When you see violence in Iraq, do they talk about how many bullets were shot, or do they talk about how many bodies there are? They don't do that in any other case, but they do it in this case because they don't want you to realize that the Palestinian military, or what amounts to military, is incredibly ineffective, ill-equipped, and so they count the number of things that they shoot, because they don't want you to realize that this is not two equal parties that are just being real stubborn with each other. It's one that militarily occupies the other, has a economic blockade on it, and is in every way that you can measure the strength of a state far better off and supported by far stronger allies. And so they want to fool you into thinking that these are equals, and that's why Israel needs to be so scared and have so much control over the Palestinian territories.
So let me end this topic on an optimistic note, though. And there's a couple of them. Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, went to the Palestinian Authority president, Mahmoud Abbas, in Ramallah and began to have talks with him. That is a positive note. I was worried that they weren't even going to have contacts with the Palestinians. And it's Trump CIA director doing the right thing. Great. Then Jared Kushner is talking about how he's got to do the outside-in strategy, which is to get the Arab states to agree to the basic outline for the peace deal, which they actually already have. That's what's so frustrating about this. The Sunni Arabs and the Israelis, the reasonable ones on both sides, have already agreed to what the two states look like. Mm-hmm. All they got to do is sign the damn paper, right? Mm-hmm. And he's saying, hey, let's all do this now when we're all aligned against Iran and the Shia. That's a good strategy. I like that strategy. And that peace deal that they already have outlined is not a bad one at all. So I'm also optimistic about that.
Although, based on the comments that we just saw, do we have any reason to believe that Netanyahu would agree to it?
No, we don't, except for the fact that, again, Trump, not a regular politician.
Okay.
And
well, we'll see.
And look, he's got his upsides and his downsides. So the upside of Trump is he'll break rules he doesn't know aren't supposed to be broken, and that might actually shake things up and get you a new result. And in this case, a new result could be war, or it could be peace. And so I think it's possible. And then the downside of his being untraditional is he says things like, we're looking at it strongly. What does it mean to look at something strongly? I love strength. I'm not sure I've ever looked at anything with strength like.
It's like you really know that you understand it when blood starts to shoot out of your eye. Okay, I'm going to make a bold prediction. In 4 years, we will not have peace.
Okay, that is the less bold prediction. But John has a terrible track record on predictions. So, hey, we might have peace. Support independent media and get the whole Young Turks 2-hour show and other network shows all ad-free. TYTnetwork.com/join. Come join us today.